The door didn't slam, it sighed shut, like the building already knew he wasn't coming back out the same. At Pelican Bay State Prison, the air feels colder the deeper you go, and by the time the escort reaches the security housing unit, the silence presses harder than the concrete. This is where men vanish without leaving. No windows. No voices. No sense of morning or night. Just a steel door, a slot for food, and the steady hum of fluorescent lights that never fully turn off. If stories like this fascinate you, hit subscribe, because this one only gets darker. The transfer happened without warning. Shackles tight, waist chain biting into skin, eyes fixed on a painted yellow line that inmates are taught never to cross. He'd heard rumors about the SHU long before the bus arrived, years inside a cell the size of a bathroom, 23 hours a day alone, sometimes 24. No phone calls. No yard you could touch. No faces to read. But rumors don't prepare you for the sound. The echo of your own footsteps bouncing back at you, as if the hallway is counting how long it will take to break you. Pelican Bay was built for control. Not just physical control, but mental. Guards didn't need to raise their voices here, the architecture did that for them. Thick concrete swallowed noise. Solid doors erased faces. Time stopped behaving like time. Minutes stretched. Days folded into each other. Men stopped marking calendars because there was nothing to mark. Inside the SHU, isolation wasn't a punishment, it was a condition. Inmates were told they'd earn their way out, but the rules shifted without explanation. A wrong association. A drawing interpreted the wrong way. Information that never arrived. Years passed while men waited for clarity that never came. Some screamed into the vents, desperate to hear another human voice bounce back. Others went quiet, conserving words like rations. One man began narrating his own thoughts just to prove he still had language. Another counted the bolts in his door every morning, terrified that if he stopped, he might forget how numbers worked. The prison insisted this unit was necessary. Dangerous men. Necessary isolation. Necessary silence. But inside those cells, something else was happening, something slower and harder to see. By the time he realized the days were no longer distinct, it was too late. He couldn't remember the sound of laughter. He couldn't picture a crowd without panic tightening his chest. And when the slot opened for food, the brief flash of another human eye felt overwhelming, almost painful. What no one told him, what no one was supposed to survive long enough to explain, was what the SHU did after the body adapted. And the men who endured it long-term would later reveal a truth Pelican Bay never intended to surface. The SHU didn't just isolate bodies, it trained minds to turn inward, then against themselves. There were no clocks inside the cells, and after a while, men stopped asking what day it was. Time became something felt, not measured. A tightening in the chest. A dull ache behind the eyes. Sleep came in fragments, interrupted by counts, metal doors, or nothing at all. The brain filled the silence with its own noise. Officially, placement in the SHU was about security. Unofficially, it was leverage. Validation lists. Confidential information. A system where freedom depended less on behavior and more on paperwork you could never see. Some inmates were told they could leave if they debriefed, give up names, confirm affiliations, say the right things. For men who truly had nothing to offer, the message was clear: stay quiet and stay buried. Guards rarely needed to threaten anyone. The structure did that for them. Recreation meant standing alone in a concrete pen, staring at a patch of sky cut into a square. Medical visits happened through doors. Conversations with staff were clipped, procedural, stripped of warmth. Over time, even neutral interactions began to feel hostile. That's when the symptoms deepened. Men who once held long conversations struggled to finish sentences. Thoughts derailed mid-word. Some became hyper-aware of sounds, the buzz of lights, distant doors, until every noise felt like an attack. Others lost emotional range entirely. Anger faded. Sadness dulled. Even hope felt abstract, like a concept remembered from another life. Paranoia crept in quietly. A glance during escort felt loaded. A delay in mail delivery became intentional. The mind, starved of stimulation, began inventing threats just to stay alert. Psychologists would later describe it as the brain rewiring itself for survival in isolation, constant vigilance with nowhere to release it. The pressure produced strange survival strategies. Some inmates exercised obsessively, pacing the length of the cell thousands of times a day. Others memorized books line by line, terrified that forgetting words meant losing themselves. A few refused all interaction, convinced that attachment was dangerous. And then there were the men who broke the silence. Through lawsuits, letters, and rare interviews, long-term SHU survivors began describing the same experiences independently: disorientation, emotional numbness, fear of human contact. Their stories matched too closely to ignore. What had been dismissed as manipulation or weakness started to look like evidence. Internal reports surfaced. Mental health evaluations quietly acknowledged cognitive decline. External psychologists warned that prolonged solitary confinement caused measurable psychological damage. The narrative shifted from discipline to harm. But inside the SHU, nothing changed yet. Because acknowledging the damage meant admitting the system itself was the weapon. And once that realization took hold, Pelican Bay faced a question it could no longer contain behind concrete walls. The truth didn't arrive all at once. It leaked. Testimonies surfaced from men who had spent 10, 15, even 20 years in isolation. They didn't sound angry. That was the unsettling part. Their voices were flat, distant, as if emotion itself had been rationed away. They spoke about forgetting how to make eye contact. About panic triggered by ordinary noise. About standing in a room with other people and feeling like prey. When some were finally released from the SHU, either to general population or back into society, the damage became undeniable. Simple conversations felt overwhelming. Crowds caused physical distress. Decisions froze them in place. A few admitted they preferred the cell, not because it was humane, but because it was predictable. The outside world moved too fast. Psychologists confirmed what the survivors already knew. Long-term isolation had altered their brains. Memory weakened. Impulse control fractured. Social awareness dulled. This wasn't a temporary shock, it was structural harm. Survival had come with a permanent cost. What Pelican Bay had treated as containment was exposed as erosion. The lawsuits gained momentum. Judges listened. Reports stacked up. The same patterns repeated across case after case. Men placed in indefinite isolation without clear pathways out. Psychological decline documented and dismissed. A system operating in silence because silence made it easier. Eventually, the pressure cracked the walls. California agreed to sweeping reforms. Indefinite solitary confinement was dismantled. New limits were imposed. Some men walked out of cells they'd entered decades earlier, blinking under real sunlight, uncertain how to exist beyond four concrete walls. But reform didn't erase the past. Many survivors would never fully recover. Relationships remained strained or impossible. Trust stayed fragile. The SHU didn't end when the door opened, it followed them, embedded in habits, reflexes, and fear. Pelican Bay still stands. The concrete hasn't changed. The corridors still echo. What changed was the record, the proof left behind by men who endured long enough to speak. They survived. But survival, inside those walls, was never the same as freedom. And their stories remain a warning about what happens when control replaces humanity, and silence is mistaken for order. If you think this story was intense, the next one will leave you speechless. Subscribe for more true crime stories that'll keep you on the edge of your seat.